The Hundred Years' War was a major armed conflict during the medieval period that had a significant impact on the culture and relations between France and England. The war spanned from 1337 to 1453, with intermittent periods of truce throughout its duration. The Hundred Years' War started as a disagreement regarding the rightful heir to the French throne. However, it quickly turned into a struggle for power over Aquitaine, a region located in the southwest of France that had been under English rule since the 12th century. The succession crisis originated from the fact that the English royal family belonged to a French lineage. During that period, the English monarchs traced their lineage back to William the Conqueror, a Norman lord who rose to power and became the King of England in 1066. As a result, they were regarded as vassals of the Kingdom of France, where William was originally from. As time passed, the English monarchs started to object to their status as French vassals. The relationship between the two kingdoms became strained when France attempted to limit the expansion of English influence. This was particularly evident when England engaged in a conflict with Scotland, a key ally of France. Under such circumstances, the English crown would engage in disputes with the French nobles to uphold their historic titles and claims to territories. In 1328, the Kingdom of France underwent significant changes following the death of King Charles IV, who had no male heirs. This raised the question of who would succeed him. King Edward III of England had a rightful claim to the throne, as he was the nephew of Charles IV. In the struggle for the throne, Charles's cousin Philip, Count of Valois, emerged victorious and was subsequently crowned as King Philip VI of France. Philip VI's initial action as ruler was to release a decree stating that the English territories in France were henceforth the possession of the French monarchy. In response to these actions, Edward III proclaimed himself as the ruler of both England and France in 1337. The House of Valois, the French royal dynasty, and the House of Plantagenet, the English royal dynasty, engaged in over a century of conflict. During the initial phase of the war, naval battles and raiding of castles and villages were the primary tactics employed by both sides. The objective was to weaken the economy and infrastructure of the opposing side. On August 26, 1346, the Battle of Crecy marked the first significant conflict of the Hundred Years' War. In the ensuing struggle, the English army, despite being outnumbered, decisively defeated the French, who suffered an exceptionally high rate of casualties. The French army lost over 4,000 soldiers, while the English army's casualties were comparatively low, with only a few hundred soldiers perishing. The battle proved the effectiveness of English archers who were equipped with longbows, defeating the numerous French cavalry. Additionally, the English captured the port city of Calais in northern France. This city remained under English control for the next 2 centuries. The Black Death arrived in Europe between 1347 and 1351, interrupting the Hundred Years' War. During the plague, which caused a 40% drop in the European population, no country had the ability to engage in warfare. In 1349, the Scots made the decision to invade England, reasoning that the plague was a divine punishment inflicted upon the English. Subsequently, the Scottish army contracted the disease and brought it back to their lands, resulting in numerous casualties. The Treaty of Brittany was signed in 1360 between France and England. Edward III was granted control of a significant portion of Aquitaine and other regions located in the southwestern part of France. Despite the treaty being signed, it was not well received in France, and unfortunately, the peace did not endure for long. The war persisted as France slowly regained the territory that had been lost, while England continued to resist. King Henry V was a prominent military leader for the English during the Hundred Years' War. He was born in 1387 as the son of Henry IV of England. In 1413, Henry V became king following the passing of his father. In 1415, he initiated a military expedition in France with the objective of asserting his claim to the French throne based on his paternal lineage. Despite having a significantly smaller army than the French forces, he managed to achieve a remarkable triumph at the Battle of Agincourt. During that period, Henry V was in command of an English army primarily consisting of archers and infantry. In contrast, the French forces were made up of knights and infantry. The English troops were facing a formidable enemy who had superior numbers and better equipment, putting them at a significant disadvantage. Henry V strategically utilized the marshy and narrow terrain of the battlefield to his advantage by selecting a well-planned defensive position. The front line was occupied by the English archers, who formed long ranks and utilized longbows. These weapons proved to be highly effective against the French knights. At the start of the battle, the French initiated a sequence of cavalry attacks. However, the English archers were able to unleash a barrage of lethal arrows, resulting in significant losses for the French forces. The muddiness of the terrain posed a challenge for the French horsemen, impeding their movements and limiting their ability to maneuver effectively. The English infantry engaged in the battle with spears and swords. The absence of proper coordination and communication among the French soldiers led to a tragic massacre. Ultimately, the English emerged triumphant with a decisive victory. According to estimates, a large number of French soldiers lost their lives, whereas the English casualties were negligible. The Battle of Agincourt had a noteworthy impact on the war as it weakened the French position and bolstered Henry V. In 1420, Henry V signed the Treaty of Troyes, solidifying his claim as the rightful heir to the French throne and formalizing his marriage to Catherine of Valois, the daughter of French King Charles VI. Unfortunately, Henry V's aspirations to unite England and France under his leadership were cut short by his premature death at the age of 35 in 1422. During this time, King Charles VII led France to recovery by establishing a new capital in Bourges, as Paris had been occupied by the English. Charles VII was aided by the renowned warrior Joan of Arc, who believed that she was sent by God to liberate France from the English occupation. Joan played a significant role in leading the French troops in multiple pivotal battles, including the liberation of Orleans. However, she was later captured by the English and sentenced to death by burning at the stake for heresy in 1431. At this point, the war had become more of a defensive effort for England, rather than an offensive one. In 1435, the English lost the support of their primary allies, the Burgundians. Their leader, Philip the Good, joined Charles VII of France through the Treaty of Arras. In that year, France captured the city of Dieppe and regained Paris in 1436. In 1453, the Hundred Years' War concluded as the French successfully recaptured the city of Bordeaux, which was the final significant English stronghold located in Aquitaine. At the onset of the war, England had conquered several territories, but eventually lost control of almost all of them. The war inflicted significant costs on both sides, resulting in the loss of thousands of lives and a substantial economic impact. It had a significant impact on the development of military strategies and tactics in Europe. France successfully adapted to the new war tactics introduced by the English, which included the large-scale use of skilled archers. It developed its own tactics to neutralize the English archers, including the use of cannons and rudimentary firearms. France's larger population and economy were among the main factors that enabled it to recover and ultimately emerge victorious in the war. During that time, France was one of the wealthiest and most populous countries in Europe, while England was comparatively smaller and less affluent. France received support from allies like Scotland and Spain, which contributed to the weakening of English dominance in Europe. The Hundred Years' War left a significant and enduring impact on the history of Europe. As a result of it, France and England experienced a surge in nationalization as their citizens began to identify more strongly with their respective nations. In the centuries that followed, France's power and influence in Europe were strengthened as a result of its victory in the war.